Hi, and welcome to Connected Conversations for Creatives, a place where creatives like you can learn, grow, and connect. I'm your host, Jennifer Carr. In an era of unprecedented creative freedom, independent artists, writers, musicians, and creators of all kinds are flourishing like never before. The digital age has opened up new avenues for self-expression and artistic exploration, empowering individuals to share their talents with a global audience. Yet amidst this creative renaissance, many find themselves grappling with the challenges that come with turning their passion into a career. One of the most important things to understand about being a creative is that if you are attempting to market your work for any kind of profit, big or small, you are running a business. This fundamental realization serves as the foundation for building a successful creative career. It's not just about the art itself, it's about recognizing the value of your creativity in the broader context of the marketplace. But with that expansion comes the responsibility of running the business like a business. That means learning what it means to be fiscally and financially conscientious. Today's guest is Kristin Delfau. She's a tax professional who has worked with a number of creatives and is herself a creative, as she's authored a book that she's set to re-release next year. And I am so thankful that Kristin is here to answer some of the most popular questions from other creative small business owners. Also, be sure to stay tuned and learn about a fantastic discount Kristin has graciously provided for you, the listeners. But first, let's welcome her to the show. Kristin, welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Jennifer, thanks so much for having me. This is going to be fun. I know it's a daunting topic, but we're going to make taxes not be so painful.
Hey, that sounds promising. But before we get into the heavy stuff, you're a tax professional, you're an author. What else do we get to know about you?
So because I have this tax practice, I've been doing it for almost 20 years. I started another company called Her Money Solutions to educate people in plain English on these topics that are really heavy and difficult. Another thing to know about me is I do have 2 kids, so I know what it's like to be a creative with children and chasing them around and all of that. Actually, I don't chase them as much anymore because they're older, but still, it gets busy. And another thing to know, which I do like to spread just so people are aware of it, I have Lyme's disease. And it's something, this is actually why we moved to Florida, because I feel so much better here. So I'm, try to be an advocate for people who have Lyme, and it's a thing that we carry because we all have our things. So it's a busy world.
One doubt, just adding kids alone is a lot, but then dealing with the chronic setbacks that come with Lyme disease. Have you always been a numbers girl?
No. No, I actually have an undergraduate degree in English, and I have my master's in diplomatic studies and international relations. And I always joke with my clients, I'm like, yes, this gives me the skills to tell somebody, hi, you owe $100,000, and tell them diplomatically. No, I actually fell into tax preparation. I do not come from an accounting background. Nobody in my family is an accountant, which kind of helps because I can explain things to normal people, I think, that way. Yeah, I fell into the tax work. I got hired by my own tax guy. And I get hired as a financial advisor, but in this office, we were required to do a tax season as well because it was a full service practice, just so we understood the relationship between the two. And when I did that, I realized how much I actually enjoyed the tax world. And I just continued on with it and ended up opening my own practice when I had my first son. And it's just gone from there because really, taxes for me, it's an education piece. It's so much education because you have practices where it's like basically give them your stuff, you get the numbers back, everybody moves on. But I find that for the people that I work with, educating them so they can make good choices in their lives is so much more fulfilling than just like, okay, you owe this, you get a refund. Okay, next. It's a different approach. And there are a lot of us out there that do that, but we're just not a majority.
It makes sense that you would want to not just do the taxes because your finances are a lifelong deal and it doesn't come around just once a year. You have to plan for the unexpected and you have to plan for the future and that kind of thing. And especially those of us who are self-employed, and that's a whole different ballgame in and of itself. So to be there for more than just April 15th, or some of those other deadlines that are out there, I think that's really special. And especially if you can take that English background and explain it to those of us who are very familiar with that world and a little less familiar with the numbers world. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really interesting, and again, it was, as you said, understanding the numbers and the finances, because nobody taught me that growing up. I wasn't taught anything beyond a checkbook and maybe the savings account, and I'm self-taught. I'm self-taught through practice. And so I know what it's like to start from nowhere.
Yes. And I was the same way. I was brought up, and I think the debit card like came along when I was probably, people started swiping debit cards even more frequently, which took a whole different approach to managing finances because it wasn't as visible. There wasn't as much, you couldn't keep eyes on money. And so my responsibility level was very low when I was out on my own for the first time. And like that first time they sent me I was in college and I got this really great offer for a credit card in the mail. And, they were like, "You're so special. We would love to give you this credit card." And I was like, "Oh yeah, that's great. It's free money." And I didn't understand a lick of it. And which is unfortunate because I'm not saying that my parents failed, but at the same time, I'm saying that as a parent, I'm now very aware of the fact. I even had a conversation with my kid at the beginning of this week. We were talking about, somebody had posted a thing on TikTok about how much do you want your future wife to make? And these guys were like, "Oh, at least 60K. And I was like, "Well, you should marry an indie author because I can tell you that is not what we make in a year." And so I was talking to my kid about it. And she was like, 60K, that's a lot of money. And I was like, it is, but it isn't. And that's not something you're ever, it's very rare that you step foot out of college making $60,000 a year, depending on, it just depends on your career choice. And so we had that, that conversation and I'm like, let's be aware. So when we went to Five Below yesterday, I was like, remember, just because you have money in your little checking account doesn't mean you have to spend it, but those are conversations that I never had growing up. And so I'm so glad that you are seeing the value of taking that experience and turning it into knowledge for other people and making it easy to understand.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. And also with my kids, and is to your point, we talk about money in our household. We're very open about having these discussions. And really what the biggest thing with my kids has been is taking the shame out of money, because a lot of us have had and are still maybe continuing to. I know I have my days where we deal with the money shame of not knowing, or we deal with the money shame of our past or our family's past or what have you. And when that comes up for us, we don't want that for our kids. We don't want it for ourselves. But in talking about it is how we release that. So with my kids, we talk about money and do we really want to spend it on this? And not like, you really shouldn't spend your money on that because that's not productive, right? It is, does this make sense to buy this? Let's sleep on it and see if we still want it tomorrow. And we practice what we preach. And because the thing is, tell your kid, "Oh, you need to wait, but I'm going to buy these shoes that I want." There's a cognitive dissonance there, right? And they're like, "But whatever." So, and with our kids, we're like, you have this money and there's certain things we're very clear. We will pay for these things because they're necessities. Another thing that I did is both my kids wanted gaming laptops. And I'm like, those are really expensive. I said, here's what we're going to do. I will put toward that laptop what I would have bought for a normal laptop, right? Any differential in the price, you're going to have to come up with the difference. And they saved. And they did their, they saved their birthday money. They worked for me. They did all of these things and they saved up and they paid off difference. And even if it was a Christmas present, it didn't matter. They felt so empowered, because they had skin in the game and they contributed. And that kind of thing is part of this whole teaching process and talking process. And we'll talk about, they're like, "Should I spend my money on this?" I'm like, "Well, what do you think?" "Yeah, I don't want it." "Do you really want it?" "Yeah, I really want it." "Okay, fine." So all these pieces, I think it's just, breaking that cycle for that next generation for me is, and for our generation, quite frankly, because some of us may still be stuck there. And if I didn't fall into the tax world, I probably would be.
Yeah, I love how our paths sometimes they take us exactly where we need to go, and they help. We're like, man, I don't know what I'm doing, and all of a sudden it just drops into your lap. This is what you're doing, and this is how you process that trauma from your past, or whatever indecision it was from your past. It's like, oh, thank you so much, universe, for putting me right where I needed to be. And so I'm thinking, I'm listening, and I promise I'll get to the numbers part eventually, and the helpful tips and tidbits. But I think this is very interesting. I know that you have a program out there, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes, for businesses or people wanting to do taxes and numbers and finances and that kind of thing. But have you considered writing a program for parents?
It's really interesting. My first iteration of Her Money Solutions was going to be for teens. And then I figured the problem with that is without having more visibility first I have to sell it to the teen and then the parent, and trying to get everybody on board would probably be difficult. It's a good idea. I mean, there are some good programs out there, but I will definitely take that under consideration. One of the programs I plan to crank out is like an evergreen self-study program. Hopefully by the end of the year, the plan is how to hire your kids in your business legally.
Because, oh my gosh, that's actually a thing that, my kid is an artist, and when she draws designs and that kind of thing, and I'm always like, hey, if you do this, $5, $10, it takes her no time at all to do things. Hey, can you put this video together for me? And so she does it super fast. And so she's making bank. Like, she makes more an hour than I do sometimes. And so it's like, but that is a key thing that I want, one, to show her that, your time is worth money. Like, people can't take advantage of your time. I'm going to compensate you. Other people should as well, unless it's like a good deed or something, you don't get paid.
Right.
But something, along those lines, I think that's brilliant, because it teaches responsibility in so many ways on both sides, business and personal.
And I'll just give you an example. Both my sons, well, more my older son, but he's on payroll. I legit have him on payroll. He gives me his hourly. He gets paid an hourly wage for what he does. And we submit payroll, and he gets a W-2 at the end of the year. And then what I do, and this I'm going to talk about in that program once I eventually launch it, is I match him with a Roth IRA contribution. So he's had a Roth IRA, a retirement account, since he was 14. And he self-manages it. So, and he's making money. He has his spending money. But also, I'm getting services that I need done in my business, things that I can't do, like the video editing. Oh my gosh, these kids just crank it out.
They're born knowing how to do it. Yes.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, it's just crazy. And I think, the software we purchased from him, because he uses it for a bunch of other things, it's like Filmora or whatever. He's like, that's the best. That was like the best buy ever. I'm like, I should have taken that as a business expense at some point, but we bought it for him before he started editing my videos. But seriously, this is teaching them in a low risk, if you will, safe base, the exchange of goods for services for goods for money. Excuse me, not goods for services, but also teaching them how to value their time, how to value their dollar. He regularly asks me for raises. This kid, I was never that person. Like, I don't know if I should ask for a raise. And like every year, it's like, hey, should I be getting a raise? I'm like, you need to do something to prove that you should get a raise, right? And then thinking, this is really good practice for him when he's out in the real world with not mom as employer, right? And that he has no fear to ask. That's great.
Yes. No, that's because I'm with you. I'm like, okay, this is what you think I'm worth. It must be the work that I'm doing. And so I'll just stay right here at this level. Like, I'm not about to. I owned a bakery for a couple years, and when prices of everything started going up, I was like, I can't raise my prices. And my husband was like, then you are making a penny for every hour that you work. Like, you have to raise your prices. And I'm like, but no, this is what people want to pay. And so like anytime it came to money, asking for more money in any way, shape, or form is like very uncomfortable for me. But then my kid has no qualms about saying, hey, what you going to pay me for this? And I'm like, I'm your mom and you get to live here,
Some things. That side note, that's actually why I stopped paying allowance for chores, because it became, everything was like, what are you going to pay me to do this? I'm like, you live here. So I ixnayed that really quickly. It's like, if it was a special project, maybe, but for the fact that you vacuumed or you cleaned the toilet or whatever, you're the one who peed on it. So guess what? You're going to be the one who cleans it. Because you've been here.
Exactly. And
So
starting out young and trying to teach them there is a reward system kind of thing in place just in
yeah.
life in general. And like, I get that. But yeah, it has come back sometimes. I'm going, no, that's a freebie on you because, I let you live here. So that,
Yeah. And if you and
time.
if you're going to do allowances, I mean, and every family is different, right? It just didn't work out for us. You really need to have really clear boundaries or what
Yes,
is an allowance item and what is expected because you live here items.
absolutely. And I think that is a huge part of it.
Do your thing and know your worth and that's always a very like moving target, right? Knowing what your worth is, knowing what to ask. It's tough. It's tough for me. It's tough for clients. It's this kind of moving target. So what I have learned over the years is if you don't ask, you don't get.
This is true. This is true because people are not mind readers, thankfully.
No, thank God. Yes. Yes.
This conversation is so good already. Like we haven't even gotten to the big stuff. Okay, and I promise we're going to get to the numbers part. But you wrote a book. Okay, and so you wrote a book, and I know that as time goes on, taxes and numbers and all that stuff changes like left and right. And so you're planning to re-release it. But let's just talk about the writing process in general as a creative. Was it nice to engage that right side of your brain a little bit, even if you were writing about money and numbers?
It was really, really cool because I actually wrote it. So my oldest now is 16 and I wrote it right after he was born. So it was a while ago. But it was really good for my brain because sometimes when your brain is doing the stuff that the other it doesn't usually rely on that hemisphere, and I never remember which is the left and which is the right. Which is which?
Your right is creative, your left is your numbers.
Okay. So when you're spending a lot of time on the left side and then you move over to the right side, it almost feels like your brain, this is going to sound dumb maybe, but it feels like your brain is stretching. Like you can actually feel it like doing things. I don't know what the brain does. But anyway, so it was really a good experience. And I think because the topic was so vast and I was covering various things and I was trying to do it in a way that is not boring. So I put it all in a Q&A format because honestly, no offense to financial writers, but man, it's hard to read through a whole book chapter by chapter, like, and just page after page. And it's just like, and then they throw in charts and you're like, oh. So I did it all Q&A style so people could read the question and say, oh, that applies to me. Let me read that. Oh, that one doesn't. Let me just skip through that. But what was really cool about it is when I was writing it, the book that really was my guiding light, if you will, when I wrote my book, it was called Turbo Mom's Guide to Saving Money Without Wasting Time. It's going to come out with a different title. It's going to be trimmed down to really more the financial stuff. But was Anne Lamott's Bird by Bird. That one, and my takeaway from her book was when she was writing a book at some point about all the birds in like North America or whatever it was, and she said to her brother, how am I going to do this? I've got to talk about every single bird. And he's like, Anne, you just do it bird by bird. And so that's what I did. I broke it down topic by topic, chapter by chapter, topic by topic within the chapter. And it made it so much less daunting. Like, I just can't imagine, when you read a really good novel and something and they have all these really good intertwined storylines, I really enjoy it. And I'm just like, gosh, do people whiteboard this stuff? Do they just like think about it? I mean, how do you even get there? Because that's just so cool to me, because even though it's creative for me, it's still linear because the topic is linear, right? So I have such a deep appreciation for that. And some of my creatives in my tax practice, I just look at the work that they do. It's like, that's so cool.
I know that it's like an extension of teaching and education and stuff, but there's something about sitting down and saying, you know what? I'm just going to let whatever's going on up here just kind of flow out. And for me, writing became therapeutic. I don't know how that works with numbers. Maybe it's therapeutic in a way, but I wish I had started writing after my kiddo was born. I probably would have had fewer mental health struggles in the end, because it is such just a relaxation. Your brain is like, oh, this is a nice break. This is a nice little vacation that you're giving me.
It's like you're not analyzing anymore. You're just letting it go, because a lot of us, and I'm sure, others who are more creative than me in the creative space, you spend a lot of time analyzing what you're doing and does this make sense and should I be doing this? But when you just let it all just flow, it's pretty cool what you can dig out. And you're like, okay, well, this makes sense. And just to look at it and let it out without judgment.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And putting your spin on it and putting your mark on it and knowing that what you're about to put out into the world is going to change somebody's life. It might be one person, that might be hundreds of people, but one way or the other, what you put out there is meant for somebody to find, and it's going to change them in some way, and it's going to impact them. And so to know that you have that power, and, obviously with that comes responsibility, but at the same time, like, you're doing what you feel is correct and what is good, and it's going to help somebody. So that's kind of cool too.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears. We're going to move into the big stuff. And there are lots of reasons that creatives struggle with the business side of their art. And I know for me that it just gets in the way, first and foremost. Like, it's one more thing, and I cannot. And it's the same thing that holds true when, I want to focus on writing, but I have podcasting stuff coming up. It's a very different business model when I'm working on the podcast, as opposed to my freewheeling when it comes to creativity, because I don't plan. I write by the seat of my pants, and whatever pops into my head, I write it. And that's where my stories come from. But with podcasting, it's very structured. And so to shift between the two, it gets in the way of my creativity, which is the same for the business aspect in general. Like, it just gets in the way. It's one more thing. I can't engage my brain. And numbers were never my thing anyway. Like, I struggled. Numbers freak me out. And so I can look at them and I think, that's a lovely number. I don't know what it means. And I'm not even joking. Like, they really, they weird me out. And so thankfully I married a guy who's good with numbers, but not all creatives have that privilege, that perk. And so thinking along the lines, what are some of the common financial mistakes that you see creatives make when they are trying to start this creative venture because numbers might freak them out a little bit?
Yeah, well, the first thing that I always tell people is, if you haven't, when you're starting on a business journey, get a separate bank account and credit card. Just separate those out from your personal. Do not commingle them, because what ends up happening is there are a few things. And you don't have to get an expensive checking account. It's easier if you do it at the same bank where you're already banking, so you can move money back and forth if you need to. Just get like the cheapest basic checking account available, and a credit card that you solely use for business expenses. The reasons for this are a few. One, because in the off chance that you get audited, IRS is going to want to see everything. And if you're commingling, you may end up in a situation where they say, well, A, this isn't a business, this is really a hobby. And now all of your expenses just got wiped out, right? You can't deduct your expenses if they're a hobby, not anymore anyway. And then the other problem is when you go to do your taxes, it's a mess. You're going through statements and you're going, okay, did I buy this for business or was this personal? And you have to sit there and pick, or you're paying somebody a ridiculous amount of money to sit and pick, because trust me on this one, you don't want to pay if you're using an accountant, you don't want to pay them to pick through your bank statements. They do not want to get paid to pick through your bank statements. Trust it. Like, I will do it, and it's going to be it's expensive for me to sit there and pick. So let me teach you how to do it, so neither of us have that headache. The easiest way to do that, separate bank account, separate credit card account. And the most frequent question I get after we have that whole talk is people say to me, but then how do I pay myself out of my business? The answer to that is, when you're what I call solopreneur or independent contractor, you're self-employed, your taxes are tied to your regular personal return. It's just on a separate schedule, right? What you're going to do is you're going to take money out of the business account, put it in your personal account, and spend it out of your personal account. And that's how it works. That transfer is called owner's draw. And it's not an expense of the business. It's just you taking money out to live your life. So that's the biggest that I see.
Literally, my first business was this great little stationery and gifts business that I traveled around with to trade shows. And I love that business. It was my absolute favorite. But also, I was very young and I was very ignorant when it came to the business side of things. And I just knew that I loved doing it. And that's what I ended up doing was, I entangled personal and business finances together, which, thankfully, thank God that things worked out the way they did, and that, we figured out the problem and we got back on track. But it was a little touch and go there for a little while. And so I agree like that. And I'm so glad that you said that, because that was literally going to be the next question that I asked was, discuss the importance of separating business and personal finances, because it can get a little dodgy. And like you said, like you're going to pay what, $200 an hour for somebody to sit there and do all that little work. And it's like, and anyway, I definitely don't make that kind of money. So,
well, and the thing is that it's also using and being smart about what you're paying for in your business. Like my clients who have multiple transactions, creatives or non-creatives, I'm like, look, get yourself a bookkeeper. Let me get you with a bookkeeper, because I'm going to guarantee you that they charge less than I do per hour. They're going to do a better job of it because that's what they do. And quite frankly, I hate bookkeeping. I do it for myself because I know how to do it, right? But I don't like it. And it's not a good use of my client's money nor my time. So let me get you with somebody who's going to crank this stuff out, get your numbers to you. You're going to spend less and you're going to have a better feel for what's going on.
Yeah, and when you transfer that responsibility, it's no longer in the way of your creativity.
The other thing I tell people, I'm like, look, if you can afford to get a bookkeeper, plus, you have to pay for QuickBooks, unfortunately, if you're going to go the bookkeeper route, because like 90% of them are using QuickBooks. But the thing is I tell them what's going to take you 8 hours to do to try to figure it out in QuickBooks, it's probably going to take the bookkeeper 1, and you can use those 8 hours to generate revenue. That's
perfect. Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. And trust me, and you'll have more hair because you're not going to be pulling it out looking at your QuickBooks.
Exactly. And that says a lot, because sometimes, when your mindset, when your state of mind is not in a good place, when you are stressed or thinking about something else, guess what? The first thing to go is your creativity, your ability to focus on any one thing, because you're too busy thinking about other things. And so I think that's huge. And thinking, you said the word afford a bookkeeper. So let's talk about, because I think budgeting is a huge idea as well that we don't, as creatives, we don't always deal with, especially if we are pantsers and right by the seat of our pants. We do everything by the seat of our pants, which is not true for me in life. But a lot of us do have that same mindset that, oh, well, I can just wing it. It's fine. But it's expensive to publish a book. There are a lot of hidden expenses that come with it. So let's talk about creating a budget. And how do we do that? Like, advice, please.
Yeah. So what really, it all depends on how much you have to work with, right? Because if you're scraping to, you got to pay your rent or pay for your food, that's taking priority. So when I look at things and I do, when I'm thinking about how much things should cost versus how much I have coming in, I look at it's the ROI on my time versus the money. And anything that's going to be an expense in your budget, how much time is it saving you and how much can you make because you're not doing it? Because everybody's budget is different. So for me to say, okay, well, you have this much this month and here are your expenses, and you just do that. Like, you can't spend more than you make. Well, yeah, that's normal, right? But sometimes, and particularly with creatives, it can be feast or famine. And I'm going to talk about that later when we get into, I'm going to talk a little bit about estimated payments and not how to not get caught out at tax time. But one thing you have to evaluate is everything in your business is, where's the revenue? You kind of have to reverse engineer it. You need to say, okay, this year I want to make X amount of dollars. And then you go, okay, how can I do that? How many copies do I need to sell? How many books do I need to write, or whatever the thing is, and go backwards and say, okay, if I want to make this, I'm going to have to sell 3,000 copies. Okay, how am I going to sell 3,000 copies? Well, I have to advertise, I have to do this. Okay, well then how am I going to do that? And how much is that going to cost me? And making sure, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody else, but shiny object syndrome, man. There's a lot of stuff that makes big promises. And now with the internet selling everything, like, 20 years ago, or actually not quite 20 years ago, but when I first published my other book, there wasn't that much out there. And now everybody's vying for your attention. okay, let's self-publish here. You can do this and I will get your book out there and da, 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 da. And it's like, okay. And also as, again, I'm maybe more linear creative, but the other thing is because we're curious and we're eternally learning, it becomes this, if I just learn a little bit more, let me just spend a little bit and I'll learn a little bit more. And then we never do the thing. That is budgeting of time. So it's not only budgeting of money, it's budgeting of our time.
Yes. And oh my goodness, I had a great conversation with, he's an audiobook narrator a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about the value of time. So often we get caught up in, I want to do, I want to do, I want to do, I want to be productive. But here's the thing, what's it costing you? And that's true with your time. It's true with your energy. It's true with your money. What are you going to prioritize, and what's going to fall by the wayside, because you do have to make sacrifices when you're making things a priority. But also, yes, the shiny object syndrome. Oh my goodness, that is so bad, especially when we like shiny things and we're just like, like we're like little raccoons that just have to find the next shiny thing. And so, yeah, it's very true. And so you have to decide what's important to you. You have to decide, why am I doing this? What are my goals for this? But I like the idea of just breaking it all down. Make yourself some columns, I guess, and say, here's the money I have and the expenses that I have. Here's the time that I have and the jobs that I want to do and the goals that I have. So I like the idea of breaking it down step by step. Even though I don't always plan my writing, I do plan for things like that. And so that's a good habit to get into.
To just carve out, however, start with an hour, because I know it can be really overwhelming.
Yeah.
But even just an hour a week to say, okay, this hour I'm going to dedicate to dealing with the business part of my business. And whether that's paying bills, whether that's, reconciling a bank account. Well, I know that's a little scary, reconciling the bank account. But do you know what I mean? It's like, if it's any of these little things, even if it's just simply making a checklist saying, okay, I have to pay this on this date, and this is what's going to happen for the whole year, right? Let me just write out the steps. Because the part that I find that can be even, the numbers are daunting and all these things can be daunting. But the other thing of like that feeling, am I missing something? Mm-hmm. Did I forget to do something? And now I'm going to go to IRS jail, which you probably aren't going to go to IRS jail. But that's like the thing that people think about. They're like, if I don't pay this, I'm going to go to jail. No, you're really not. But these things that if you can just write down the things you need to do in your business, just so that it's like, okay, well, it's January. I have to renew my LLC if you have an LLC, or it's February and I have to pay this or whatever. You already know it's coming. That makes it easier. I have to do this myself because I'm managing 2 businesses in a household. There's a lot of stuff going on here.
Absolutely. And I think you have to get into the mindset of it's a business. So many times we look at it, when we're sitting there writing our books and we upload them to Amazon, we're like, oh, I'm going to make money from making, art or whatever. Well, here's the thing. Now it's a business. And if you don't treat it like a business, you will find yourself over your head or upside down. It is a shift in the mindset that you do have to take on. And I have talked about this with marketing people who are like, you have to create a brand for yourself, and you have to, it's a business. It's not just a fun time where you get to write words and get lost in your imagination. That's part of it, but that's not the end of it.
Yeah, it's part of it. Well, because if you lose the joy though,
yeah.
And because you have to find that balance between it's a business, but we have to find the joy so we still have the business. But I think the main takeaway of all of this part of the conversation is really be intentional about and take a moment to say, why am I doing this? How is this furthering my goal? Whether it's writing this book or pitching this, article or buying this program, what is my intention? What do I expect to get out of it? And if it's anything like a program or a coaching or whatever that you're investing in, whatever you're spending, how are you going to make that back and more? And also doing it in a way where you're not shaming yourself for doing it, or judging yourself, but really trying to, and this can be really hard, but pulling the emotion out of the money, because really good marketers are really good to selling to our emotions, but saying, okay, let me look at this objectively. What am I getting? What am I spending? And truly, is this going to move the needle for me?
Yes. No, that's brilliant advice. That is fantastic because a lot of times we do get caught up in, ooh, I can't live up to these expectations that are being set for me through this program. And then all of a sudden we do have that shame that, oh, I just wasted money on it. But I think you can learn just about anything from anybody, good and bad. Like maybe I don't buy another program from that person.
Well,
But there's always opportunity for learning.
I'll tell you one thing I did learn when I started my tax practice. One of the tax organizations I belong to, it's called National Association of Tax Professionals. If you're looking for somebody, I would suggest going there because you can find somebody who's part of an association who's actually, trying to keep up with their continuing ed and what have you. And they generally tend to be good people. But what I will say is that I took on a mentor because at that time, I don't know if they still do this, but they had a mentor program. And with their mentor program, I spoke with my mentor once and he spent an hour and a half complaining that his rates were too low and his clients didn't value him and all of this stuff. And so what you're saying out of having, getting something good out of something bad, like it was a completely somewhat not mentor-y conversation. But what I did tell you, I learned is I got off that phone call and I increased my rates that I was planning on charging. Because I was like, I don't want to feel undervalued. I don't want to feel overworked. I don't want to feel like I hate my life. Mm-hmm. So yes, you can always take something out of something that didn't maybe go the way you were expecting it to go.
I love that. And sometimes those conversations are not the ones you really want to be stuck in. But when you can walk away from it and be like, yeah, that helps a lot. And not really think it would. I mean, way to find a lemonade from those lemons.
Yeah, you just look at it and you just say, okay, this could have been a waste of time, but we're going to make the best of it.
That sometimes happens when you're making art too. You're like, I wrote a book and I looked at it and I read it and I was like, but I wrote a book, and so then I went back and I fixed it and it got better. But I spent a lot of time and I thought, this is not the book I want to put out there. But I went back and I fixed the problems that were with the book after I had some feedback given to me. And it was like, oh, yeah, that's so much better. So you turn things around. You just have to be willing to put in the time to make the changes. But yeah, and I really think that we as creatives sometimes undervalue our art because, you're talking about raising your prices. Sometimes we don't want to ask people to pay, $7.99 for an ebook because we get so used to maybe Kindle Unlimited where it's free, even though you've paid your subscription fee or whatever. And it's like, no, you have to put a price on your book and it needs to be able to pay for itself because those prices to print your book or to publish your book are not low. And so sometimes you just have to make that decision to say, hey, my work is worth it. I'm going to raise my rates a little bit and we're going to go from there, see what happens. You can always lower them if you have to, but I don't recommend it.
Yeah, it's easier to have a higher rate and discount it than to start low and try to push high. That's just what I've found in the world of these things. And also what we do battle though, all of us, is this concept of, because there's so much free out there, which is free but not really free, right? It's getting, there's no free lunch. So it's getting subsidized by ads. It's getting subsidized by an artist not getting their payment they deserve. I mean, we all saw the whole writer's strike and AI and all of these things, which are really important conversations. And it was good that they got out sort of ahead of it. And again, I'm not privy to those. I know nothing about it other than they managed to settle, and whether it was a good settlement or not, I have no opinion because I didn't read it. But the thing is that we're having these conversations about what our value is, and we need to stick to what our value is and not undervalue ourselves. That's a very good point, because people are like, oh, I have Kindle Unlimited and I should be able to read all these free things. And then they're like, but you just spent, 3 months or 3 years of your life writing this book.
Yeah.
You need to get compensated.
Oh yeah. And you get paid a penny for 2 pages read. Like when people on Kindle Unlimited read my books on Kindle Unlimited, they read 2 pages, I make a penny.
Yeah. There needs to be other avenues for what you're putting out there into the world. If people find value in it, you should be compensated for it.
Absolutely.
And that's just, I feel very strongly about that.
Well, and it's true in life too, right? Like, who are you going to invest your time and who are you going to allow to take your time? You have to value that because you are a person with value. And so how you spend, who you allow to speak into or against you, like you're devaluing yourself when you let people discount you for any reason. And so it's not just, work and author and creative and money advice, it's life advice.
It is, because one thing, we can always get money back, but we can't get our time back.
Mm. Mm.
That's part of that. And the other part is, the other thing I was speaking to is somebody who's actually in my program right now, my deducted program. And I said to her, something that I learned that was really, really important is that the only people who get mad when we start putting up boundaries are the people who benefited from us not having them in the first place.
Mm.
So, and that goes for your time, that goes for your money, that goes for life. So,
Yes,
any
that is a mic drop moment. That is so good. We're not done. And like, that's so good.
yeah, we way veered off of tax.
Mentioned your deductive program, and that is one I mentioned earlier. You have a discount code available, but we haven't talked about the program that's tied to that. So tell us about the program, and then we'll move into like our Q&A time.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, thanks. So Deducted is a program I put together because I found a lot of solo entrepreneurs, independent contractors are not served by the business model. Like, the people who are talking about business stuff, they're talking about bigger businesses and for S Corps and for C Corps and partnerships and all this. And it's like, hi, we're starting, or we have a business going, but we don't really understand what the business part is. It is a 4-week live program that I do. It teaches about what deductions you can legally take. It explains self-employment tax. We talk about home office. We talk about quarterly estimated payments, retirement plans for people who are self-employed, what kind of, how to deal with the books, all of these things, because it's all the questions that have come up time and time again with clients over the years. And when I work with people individually, I teach it to them. But in tax season, I can only do so many tax returns. But there's so many other people who could use this information in plain English, because a lot of tax people don't have the time. And it's not that they're bad people or they're bad tax people. I mean, some of them maybe, but overall, they're not bad people, but they just don't have the time to sit and teach it. So it's, let me teach you so that when you go back to whomever you're working with, or if you're doing it by yourself, you have a grasp of how this is supposed to work.
That's fantastic. And I think that is something that anybody, whether you're a creative or, a blue collar worker, whatever, I think anybody would benefit from this, to have it come from somebody who actually knows the business and you can ask questions of, because you said it's a live thing. So I'm assuming there's a Q&A type situation where if somebody's like, I don't understand, I'm like, yeah,
absolutely
great.
That's the one. I mean, I'm going to have, pre-recorded courses available, but this is the one that I really feel strongly needs to be done live, because there's so many permutations that come out and people learn from other people's questions. And I learn because there are questions that come up and I'm like, in all these years, I've never seen that version of this question. But then, so let me go find out. And it's something that, and I really feel, and I've brought this up again, and I'll probably bring it up again, I feel really strongly about doing it as a place of no shame. So I can be like, what? You don't have a business bank account? No, we're going to talk about it. If you don't have one, we're going to show you how to get one. Because shame doesn't forward us. It doesn't move the needle forward. It doesn't get us anywhere. Just hold us back. So what was really fun is one of the people that was one of the early in my beta rounds, because we're on round 4 now, I think, of Deducted. Yep. She went through it and did the whole thing, and she came back. She's like, I felt so empowered, because when I talk to my tax person, I now speak their language, and I feel like I know what I'm doing. You're not expected to be an accountant when you come out of this, but it's to get you to get to the right questions and not feel so scared. Like, am I doing this wrong? And am I missing things? That's the other big thing. People are like, what am I missing? Could I be missing the deduction? Am I not writing off something I didn't think of? That's, and the, just so that people can get started, I have on my website, I have a checklist. It's all the deductions for solo entrepreneurs, independent contractors. And it is a checklist that follows the Schedule C. And the Schedule C is where, if you're self-employed, this is the form you're going to use. So all of those categories follow that form so that you know how to at least put them in the right boxes. Like,
and it's free. It's a free download.
Right. And so if you're working with a tax person, or even if you're doing it on your own, if you're classifying your expenses, you've already got them in the right spaces. We're pretty close, right? There might be some you're not sure of. The whole, we have this $500 of expenses and then, 20,000 of ask my accountant. It usually cuts down on that. But it's the concept of, if you can get them in the right groupings and you understand why you understand what that should look like, it helps move you along and makes the process easier. And also you can see where you're spending, right? Because if you're dropping $5,000 on advertising and you're not getting $5,000 of revenue out of that advertising, it might be time to switch it up. That's the other important part about keeping track of these things. It's not just purely for taxes, but it's to understand what's working and what's not working in our business.
Yes, that's good. Which leads me literally into the first question. Tune in November 20th to hear Kristin answer the top 9 questions asked by creatives about taxes. In the meantime, check out Kristin's website, hermoneysolutions.com.